Okay, before this battery runs out, I'm gonna show you what we're gonna do. We're gonna make French bread. We're gonna make my super easy French bread recipe. And I'll show you what we got here. I've got some flour. So I'll have to open this up. One-handed is a little bit of a challenge. So we've got some high gluten bread flour. Got my measuring cup, spoons. Got my Danish, I think it's called a bread whisk or whatever it's called. Got a rubber spatula. My yeast, that's a SAF instant. Non-iodized sea salt. Got a nice bowl. Got a couple stoneware bread pans. I probably don't need to do anything with those, but drop the bread in them. But I might put a little non-stick on them. Cookie sheet that's only used for making bread. This is not used for any other purpose. I've got my bread lame right here. Just a razor on a stick. And my super secret special non-stick that we make ourselves. So, hundreds of loaves of bread made this way. I've been making this French bread for a long time. What's a long time? I don't know. Nearly 20 years. And I've made lots of different bread. I've been doing it for over 35 years. This one is just such an easy recipe. Why I wasn't making it before, maybe I was and I just don't remember. But we're going to get started. So let's let her rip before this battery dies. All right, the first thing I'm going to do, I don't have chlorinated water. So our water's free from chlorine and from fluoride. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this guy. Yeah, I'm going to go fill this guy up. Look at that. You know, that's close enough, right? Good enough. Some might say, oh, but it has to be perfect. No, it does not. We start with the water and we try to get it pretty warm. We want that water to be nice and warm. That's the best way to do this. Hot as I can get it. So my water runs about 120 degrees. And at 120 degrees, you know, you'd think that's too hot for yeast. It's really not, because this bowl right here is cool. So when that water goes into this bowl, it makes it nice and cool. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead. Let me see if I can put this out here a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get, as you can see, some yeast. Throw that in there. So that's 1 tablespoon, 1.5 teaspoons. This is a very yeasty bread, but it tastes delicious. It's great. It's a true French. So there you go. Got the yeast in there. Now I could mix that up. Not going to. Next, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put some flour in there. So I'm going to set you down. So I'm going to dry that measuring cup real quick, and I need that. Okay, gotta get this good dry. So the yeast is in the water. Get this guy good and dry. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just needs to be able to do what I need it to do. I need some kind of a scoop, so I use measuring cups as a scooper, that's all. Now this is not, doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be pretty close to what you want. And in this particular case, I'm going to put 4 cups of high gluten bread flour in with the water and yeast that I have. Okay. Next, we're going to go ahead and put a tablespoon of non-iodized yeast in there and spread it around. Okay, got her? Now, the fun part. Take my ring off. We're going to start first with taking this guy and just stirring around the dough so you can see what we've got here. Pretty dry already. And that's okay, because it's not going to be. It's actually going to be too wet. Believe it or not. You can see that it's sticking. I had to put you back over there because in order for me to do this and let you see it, I need both hands. It does take both hands. So I use that little Danish whisk, bread whisk, whatever you want to call it. I use it to get things started. I'm just taking a bit of a break from work. Okay, so take this rubber spatula and I'm just kind of scraping the sides a little bit so that we can get them in there. And now that's just 4 cups of flour. Now I'm going to show you this. So all I'm doing is I'm taking it, I'm just pushing my knuckles into it, and you see how it's pretty wet. It didn't seem that way at first, but now as I get into it, it's starting to get very wet, and you can see it's pulling off on my knuckles. And that's okay. It's too wet, and I'm going to try to break up any of the yeast I find, but I'm not going to worry about it a whole lot. But now you see how as we mixed it in, it started to get too wet, and now you could see how it's sticking to everything. Look at that, okay? So, hang on a sec. Let's grab this little measuring cup I had here. And I'm just gonna take about half of it and dump that in to the dough. Now, you can see it sticking to the bottom. Look at that, okay? So we're gonna flip it over. And I'm just going to keep trying to work that in. Now that was just about a 1/4 cup. So that puts me at the original 4 cups, which weren't perfectly measured. Okay. And another 1/4 cup. And you're going to see that as I work this in, it's going to still be too wet. Okay. See how now it's still pulling away? Coming out away on my fingers. So as I get it worked into the center of this dough ball, it's pulling away on my fingers. That tells me that it's definitely on the wet side still. That's okay. I expect this. Put you down to get some more. Now doing it by hand, that's a little more than a 1/4 cup. Doing it by hand is definitely harder than doing this with the mixer. And I have arthritis, so I don't do this very often by hand. So I would say I'm very close to, to the 5 cups, probably about 4 3/4. Nah, maybe a little less than 4 3/4, 4 2/3 maybe. Okay, it doesn't really matter. That's not the point. The point is the feel and whether or not the bread doesn't, gets to that point where it's not so bad that I can work it with both hands without having a handful of dough. Okay? So I'm going to set you down. See, look at that. Set you down so that I can now both hands in there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to rub the dough off my fingers. Hopefully the battery will last long enough. It's getting very close. So we'll try to rush through this. If it dies, that's okay. I could take a pause. So now I'm basically just kneading the dough in this bowl and trying to get that flour worked in. The rule of thumb is that you really want flour to be worked in for a minimum of 5 to 6 minutes in order to get the good gluten window. So hopefully that battery will last. We're getting very close here. But it is starting to stick and pull off on my fingers again. So now I've got one hand that's still relatively clean. So I'm just going to take approximately a 1/4 cup of flour and get it in here and then continue to work it. And again, the idea is that the bread needs to have a decent moisture content in order to rise well. And it needs to have a good gluten window, but it can't be too wet or it'll just fall flat on you like a pancake. So you've got to find that happy medium, and we're getting very close to it. Now I will tell you that I find that when using a bread or a KitchenAid, I tend to use a little bit more flour I think because the KitchenAid mixes the ingredients and kneads the ingredients better than I do by hand, especially these days, because it's been a long time since I've made bread strictly by hand, other than sourdoughs. But a bread like this one that needs to be kneaded definitely takes a little more work. Okay, now, this is feeling pretty good. So let me pick you up again. So you can see, I've got my dough ball here. So we're gonna take this, oh, wait. First, we gotta come over here. All right, now this stuff here is my better than pan spray, non-stick stuff. We're gonna get some of that. Take this nice dough ball here. And then now, I work this on the cookie sheet. So let me tilt this camera. Did GoPro know that it was going to be used that way? They probably did. I put some of that non-stick on my hands, and there's some on the cookie sheet. And now, I'm just going to start to work this bread. And I like to do a turning kind of way. It's sort of like the fold and turn. So I take this and I'm going to pull this around like so, and then push with both hands down, turn it, pull it, and push it. There's lots of different ways, and you can watch different videos on how to knead. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but what we're looking for is a good stretch. Hopefully that battery lasts. It's almost dead. Look at, you see that spring? See that? Push it, see that spring? Let me get you in a little closer here. Make this ball. I'm stretching the ball. Now, if you look, it's still pulling apart. That's not a good enough gluten window, okay? So we're gonna put some grease down, and then we're gonna hit it hard again. It's pretty close. I mean, you can always tear your bread, but one of the things I hope you can see is how it's elastic. It's bouncing back. Every time I push on it, it's bouncing back. That's pretty good. Nice and bouncy. So, let's put this in a ball. That's not a bad ball. Feels pretty good. It's been a while since I've done it by hand, but I can see if I push, it springs up, okay? Maybe give it a little more. Notice I'm not using a floured surface. Do not use a floured surface to do your yeast breads. Sourdough? Yeah, sure, I do use floured surface. It's a little different. This, don't use a floured surface. Work for that gluten window. Okay, I'm gonna call that. So, get some more of this non-stick, put it on here. I like to kind of get enough on the surface that I know I can be confident that it's gonna stay moist. Okay, now, cover it. Like that. Cover it. Okay, so I got yellow bar on the battery. We made it. I've got my gloves out from when we could take it out of the oven. I got my oven rack sitting in the one just below the middle. I got my dough ball here resting. Nice dough ball. Okay. It looks like it probably could have used a little bit longer of a need. That's okay. We're going to find out. The one thing about bread is experiment, and then after you've done some experimenting, do it some more. The bread has rested fairly well already. I will show you. So it's clearly risen already. I grease the corners, especially on the top edges. People tend to forget. This stoneware I probably don't even need to grease anymore. I don't need to do it on any of my others. I don't do it. I think I do this out of habit only because when making loaf bread, you are capturing a lot of heat and moisture inside the pan itself. And that's typically what causes bread to stick and not come out of a baking pan. So by putting my non-stick on here, I'm just helping it, just making sure that I don't run into an issue. And that sucker up. Set this plastic over here. Okay. Now we're going to cut this. So I want you to see this here. We're going to cut it. You can see the rise in it already. So we've got a nice rise, okay? So I'll set you down here. I'm going to take half of this, set that over there. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to tilt you down so you can see this better. And I'm going to form a loaf. So the first thing I do, I like to try and get some of that non-stick on my fingers. But you can see where it's not bad. It's pretty good. So I usually flatten it out one way and then flip it over like this so that I can fold it. I'm not a pro at folding bread dough. I'll tell you that some people are fanatical about how perfect their loaves are. I make a lot of bread. I don't need my loaves to be perfect. Now, I can tell you already that this is going to be nice French bread. I can tell you because I can feel it. And that is the key to making a good bread. You got to be able to feel it. You need to know what it feels like. And you don't have to be gentle, okay? This one's pretty moist, but that's okay. You'll see that it's not sticking to my fingers. It's not coming off on them any longer. And I'm able to pinch it together real good, okay? Kind of like to curve it in like this, and then I kind of roll it like that. Roll it like so. Looks pretty good. I'm going to take it, stick it in here, and then I usually kind of squish it down a little bit, try to even it out. Nothing crazy, just a little bit. I can already see yeast bubbles, gas bubbles forming in this here. You could see one right there, actually. And you could see I could push in and deflate it a little bit, but it's starting to suck back in, okay? So I know I've got a good dough going here. So push that guy down, flip her over like so. Okay. And I just fold my bread loaves. Okay. But I used to try a lot harder to fold my loaves a little better. Honestly, I've gotten to the point now where I've found that as long as I've got the dough consistent enough, moist, pliable enough, as long as I can pinch and stretch the dough and pinch it together, then it typically makes good loaves. It makes nice looking loaves. And you can see how I'm pushing down in the center and stretching it. I'm stretching the dough out like so. And then I give it a roll, usually one to either side, just to kind of fold those in. And you can see how it's kind of bouncing back a little bit on me, and it's just stretched and it's smooth over the top. That's it's gonna be a good loaf of bread. You're gonna be able to do that. And then just for fun, we're gonna do an early cut with the lane. So we're just gonna come in here, slice down the middle like that. Same with this one. It looks good. My phone's ringing, so let me pause this. Okay, the last thing to do here is Put that lame away. Last thing to do is to cover these up. I cut those. I think you saw me cut those. I had a quick phone call that happened, and so I had to take that call, but you could see how that cut and how everything is so deep already and spreading out already. That tells you this is going to work. Okay, just one of those little guys. So now I'm going to take this sheet here, and what I like to do is I rub it around in the non-stick stuff, because I don't really want it to stick to my bread that much, okay, at all actually, but I want it to help hold in some moisture, okay. And then I'm going to take this guy, set him aside, take my pans, and I like to take it off. I like to take my pans and put them on the towel. I just feel it helps insulate them a little bit. So I put them on the towel. I take this bit of plastic here, throw that on top of them, like so. Doesn't have to be perfect, it's okay, right? Like that. Take this towel, put it on top. This should help keep the moisture in. I want to keep the moisture in, and it's going to help kind of protect it from any possible breezes that come through. Somebody suddenly opens a door and walks through here or something like that. They're not going to. I got to clean up a couple things. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set a timer for 20 minutes. Bingo. And when that timer goes off, I'm going to turn the oven on. When the oven is just about up to temp, I'm going to put the glaze on those, get them ready to go in, and then we're going to put them in. And you'll see all that. And this is just the start. So I don't expect that somebody's going to watch this video and go make perfect bread immediately afterwards. I think that's kind of silly, but it could happen. I like to think I'm a good teacher. But this is step one. This is just step one. If you're successful with this recipe, doing bread this way, I would say do it a while. Make a bunch of bread. Give it to your neighbors. Do whatever you got to do. Make bread for the kids or husband or wife or whoever. Practice, practice, practice. Once you get that feel down, that feel is going to be everything in the future for making other breads. They're not all going to feel the same, but there's going to be similar qualities and properties to all types of breads. Sourdough can be a little different. That's okay. But for now, this is the beginning of making excellent bread, and anybody can do this. I've got my extra camera right here. That guy is going to watch them loaves, and I'll do a time lapse to see how well they rise over the course of this stretch. So we got 15 minutes before I turn the oven on. Okay, the timer's going off. So, bake 400. Now, that's gonna heat up. I want you to look at this bread. I hope you could see that. But you could see, we've got a rise here. We got bumps. That's good. So now, we just wait. It takes about 15 minutes for that oven to warm up to 400 degrees. So we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna set you back down. And, probably 10 minutes or so from now, I'll come, uncover the bread, put the glaze on it, and then we'll get it ready to go in the oven. So hang in there. We're just about there. All right, about 8 minutes has passed. The oven temperature is at 300. Still got to get up to 400. I'm going to go ahead and uncover this bread and have a quick look at it. So let me set you down. All right, let's have a look and see how the bread looks. Now at this point in the bread making, I tend to be more gentle. This is the point that we don't want to deflate the bread, so I'm going to carefully pull this off. Now, most bread recipes call for the bread to rise double in size. That's usually what they call for. This is clearly double in size. So we've been rising this bread for 28 minutes. It has definitely doubled in size. So now I'm going to go ahead and put my glaze on. The oven's already at 325. So see, it was 300 degrees as I started talking, and now it's 325. So we're just gonna go ahead and I just gently spread this on with this silicone brush. I could call it a pastry brush. I don't know, it's my wife's. I steal it. Same as the pastry cutter. She calls it her cat puke scraper. Had a cat that used to puke up all the time, and that was the tool she liked to use to scrape up the cat balls or whatever they were, and obviously then wash and use for pastry. I use it to cut my bread. Maybe that's the secret ingredient. Cat puke enzymes from 20 years ago have stuck around, and it's given me the secret enzyme, secret ingredient. Come on, folks. We wash things around here. Okay, that's pretty good. I mean, it's a paint job, right? You do what you think is right. Okay, there you go. Hopefully you can see that well. Try to give you the side profile view. We've got a good rise. We're almost ready to stick those suckers in the oven. So stand by. 400 degrees, and the oven fan's shut down, so the oven is ready to go. So we are going to put these loaves in the oven. So stand by. We set you down. Set the timer. I'm going to set the timer at, I'm going to go 30 minutes. Holy smokes. Check this out.